Right, we're going to talk about gates now. What is a gate? Again, from class, the gate cuts out unwanted sounds and allows the sounds that you do want to hear, it allows those to be heard, right? And it's just like a gate, right? You know, you can think of it as a gate, like a sheep gate or something. You know, tall sheep and tall, big, strong, tall sheep can make the door open up, make the gate open up. But the weaker, smaller sheep don't have enough force to make the gate open up. Therefore, they stay inside the pen. They stay safe. It's the same thing with gates in audio, right? Stronger, louder signals will make the gate open up. The assumption is the louder signals are the ones you want to hear, right? And softer sounds don't have enough volume, don't have enough loudness to make the gate open up, right? So that's how that works, right? Soft sounds, the gate stays closed for, right? They're not powerful to make the gate open up. The louder sounds can make the gate open up, right? You determine how much force it takes to make the gate open up, right? So that's what a gate does, right? Now, why would you want to use it? Well, because sometimes you don't want to hear certain sounds, right? For example, a really obvious example is you go to again, I use this in class, but I'll bring it up again. Say somebody goes to the Guitar Center and buys a cheap guitar-shaped wood product, and they plug it into a super loud amp, and they also plug it into a bunch of pedals and stuff that gives them the sort of like the crazy, death metal sound. When you do that, though, the guitar is cheap, the pedals are cheap, the amp's cheap. So when they crank up the amp, what you hear is a bunch of hum and buzz. Sure, when the guitar player plays the guitar, you hear guitar, right? But when they stop playing, all you hear is, I'm sure you guys have heard that before, right? Well, that can't be in a live show, and that can't be in a recording. So what are you going to do? Well, you use a gate. Hopefully, and this is generally the case, the sound of the guitar is loud enough to make the gate open up, but the hum and buzz isn't quite loud enough to make the gate open up. It stays closed for the hum and buzz. And that's how you get rid of it, right? Another reason you might want to have a gate is because, excuse me, like for example, toms, right? Of course, you wouldn't do this because you're going to know how to do this, but say you get a recording that somebody else did, right? And they didn't mic up the drums very well, right? And you've got all these close mics on the drums, you have overheads, right? So what ends up happening is when the drummer is playing the kick and the snare and not playing the toms, right? The microphone that are on the toms are picking up the snare. They're picking up leakage from the snare and the kick drum, right? And of course, because of that leakage, and there's a time differential there, there's phase issues, what's going to end up happening, the leakage, the snare and the kick leakage into the tom mics is going to make the snare and the kick sound bad. It's going to have this weird phase thing, right? So what you need to do is get rid of the leakage that are in the toms, right? Now you're mixing, you can't do anything about how it was recorded, but what you can do is you can throw a gate on the toms. The gates will open up when the drummer hits the tom, right? That's a loud sound. But the leakage, hopefully, the leakage is not as loud, and the leakage is too soft to make the gate open up. And that's how you get rid of the leakage in the toms, right? So that's what we're going to do. Let me show you something over here, right? I've got a session here, and it's a drum session. It's this band by the name of Chakra Khan. And if I come over here, you'll hear, let's listen to the drums. Here we go. This is the whole thing. There we go. Right, so you get the idea. But check this out. These toms have leakage in them, right? And here's the leakage. It's actually, the leakage is not so bad, but here's something that doesn't sound good. Listen. me put this pandas in the middle here. Do you hear that? I'm going to turn down my mic so you can hear this a little bit better. So there's like this constant woo, right? Here's the other tom, right here. Let's get rid of that, right? So let me show you how to do this, right? I'll give you something else for the lab, but I'm just going to show you this thing here, right? So here we've got a tom. Let's go over to this guy, right? So what I'm going to do is, this is how I do it, right? You select a little bit of audio and you throw a gate on there. I'm just using the Pro Tools one, the ones that come, there we go. Expander gate, there it is. Now remember from class, the threshold determines how loud something has to be to make that gate open up, right? The hold determines how long the gate stays open, right? Again, you want it to stay open long enough so you don't cut off the sound. You don't want it, like for example, where my cursor is, you don't want the gate to cut off there. It needs to last long enough so you hear this tom, right? Or the guitar, or whatever it is you're using, right? The release determines how quickly, once it's time to close, in this case, it's going to stay open for 50 milliseconds, and then it's going to take another 80 milliseconds for it to close, right? After the 50, right? The attack determines how quickly the gate opens up. In almost every case, 99.9% of the cases, you want this gate to open up as fast as possible. If you don't, then you're going to cut off the beginning of the sound, right? I'm going to turn this up. This is like another, you hardly ever see this thing there, but I'm going to turn it up to like 10 to 1, right? And then the range determines if the gate is going to stay closed all the way or if it's going to stay slightly open, right? Why would you want the gate to stay slightly open if you wanted to get rid of unwanted sounds? Well, because sometimes if the leakage is bad enough, people will notice this thing closing and opening, right? For example, if the leakage is pretty bad on these toms right here, which it's not, but if it were, people would hear when that tom mic opens, when the gate opens, that all of a sudden you're going to hear a totally different sound, right? Basically, you're going to hear, if you get rid of the leakage, you're going to hear the snare and the hi-hat and the kick are going to sound great and tight, and they're going to be really cool. As soon as the gate opens up, now the snare and the kick and the hi-hat aren't going to sound very good anymore, right? And it's going to be like a really big change, and people are going to like, they'll know something's going on. So you might have to compromise and allow some of that leakage to get in there. Notice that this thing's not all the way down. This is telling you how much is how much the gate is closing. Notice that it looks a lot like the compressor, right? So if I go like this, the gate's almost entirely shut. And here it's kind of staying open slightly. Anyway, this is what you're going to end up using just in case, right? The recording's really bad. In this case, we can shut it all the way down, right? So I've got that thing selected. And again, I'm going to lower this so everything opens up the gate, right? And just so I can hear it clear, I'm going to make these really fast, right? There we go. Right, so everything's making that thing open up. I want to get rid of that leakage. Let's select a little bit longer here. That was shift click, right? Just like Microsoft Word. So I'm going to start cutting out some of these sounds. So I want to adjust the threshold so only the tom opens it. There we go. So only the tom is opening. But it sounds terrible, and the reason it sounds terrible is because the hold isn't long enough. So let me go ahead and make the thing stay open longer. There we go. Right. So it's staying open long enough, but it's closing really fast. When it's time to close, it just shuts it down. That's not what we want. So that's the release. So let me lengthen the release. There we go. Maybe a little bit, back it off a little bit. Maybe, too much. No, too much. Crank it up a little bit more. Now notice, that symbol is still in there. I can't get rid of that symbol. The gate's open. It's still open. It's closing, but that thing is still open. So if it's open, leakage is gonna get in there, right? And so there we go, right? So you just can't get rid of everything, right? But at least it sounds natural. Right, that's how that works. So I'm gonna come over here and do this guy right here. And I'm gonna come over here again, expander gate. Again, I'm gonna turn this down so everything opens it up. And I'm gonna come over here and make this really fast. So it's really obvious to my ear. I wanna make it really obvious. Turn that way up. And I'm gonna have it close all the way. The attack needs to be as fast as possible. It's gonna open up as quickly as it can, right? Let's do it. Do you hear that constant ringing? Gotta get rid of that. We can't have that thing like constantly droning in my mix, right? Can't have that. Here we go. Oop. Oop, that little snare. There we go. So hold. Make it, let's stay open a little bit longer. Okay. Now the release, it's slamming shut, so turn that up. There we go. There we go. Doom. Nice. There we go. So now check this out. Let's listen to this, the drums. You should be able to hear. Let me crank these guys up. Here we go. I'm going to exaggerate these. Let me turn these toms up quite a bit so you can actually hear the difference, right? So this is with the gates closed. I mean, the gates are actually active. They're working. Let me bypass these. Listen. We can't have that like ooh, constant like ooh. Kick it in. Way better, right? I hope you guys, I'm thinking you guys can hear that, right? So turn those off. I command click that or control click it on Windows to bypass it. Hear that? Ooh. Can't have that in there. That doesn't work. Now, people don't notice that, like my mom, but she wouldn't notice that consciously, but in the back of her mind, she's going to be hearing that. Her brain hears it, you know. Not cool, right? So we need to get rid of that. Ooh. Let's get rid of it. Much better. I think you guys get the idea, right? So you know, go back to the video if you need to see how I did that. Just go back and re-watch the video, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this and I'm going to show you the lab. I'm going to send you guys this here so you guys can play with it as well. But we could also gate the kick and the snare as well, right? But let me show you the lab, the one I want you guys to do. All right, so let me go ahead and close that. I'll save it. Here we go. I'm going to say open recent, and that's gates. All right. Here we go. Let me turn this and get this guy up here. Let's go jumbo. Now here we have a kick drum. We have, or what is it? A snare. Yeah. So there's a snare, and there you can hear that there's a kick drum leakage in there, right? We got to get rid of that snare. That can't snare. I mean the kick. I'm sorry. That kick in there. We got to get rid of that leakage. So back to this. Here we go. Here, plug in, dynamics, expander gate. Let me bring it right. Here we go. Here's what we're going to do. Again, like I was showing you, I'm going to, again, to make it really obvious to my ear, so it's really easy for me to hear, I'm going to make this really fast. It won't sound good. This goes all the way up here, range. Again, I'm going to get rid of that thing completely. It's not reasoning. And then this, I'm going to pull it down. I want that gate to open up as quickly as possible for the snare and not for the for that kick leakage. So I'm going to come over here. Everything's going to make it open up, right? So I'm going to turn up the threshold so only the snare opens the gate. There we go. So now the snare is the only thing that's making it open, right? But it's getting cut off. So now what we need to do is to lengthen the hold. We want it to stay open a little bit longer. There we go. And then we need to have set the release so it doesn't slam shut. I'll go too far. There we go. Bypass it. There we go. Right? So that's how that works. Works the same way with somebody doing a voiceover. It works the same way for a guitar or whatever, anything. You just apply the same working method there, right? So there's your Gates lab. Work on that one, work on the compression one, and I'll send you the band, those drums, and see if you can fart around with it and make it sound cool, right? All right, there we go. See you in class.